At their EU summit this week, European leaders focused not on the issue that has concentrated minds for several months, namely the indebtedness and travails of the Greek government, but a fiscal compact, an attempt to install good housekeeping discipline on the budgetary and deficit side of life for the future. That agreement is going to be ratified in March. It occurred against the background of another slew of rather dismal economic news, particularly on the jobs front. I'm going to explore some of the implications with my colleague Stephanie Hare, and we're going to begin, Stephanie, by understanding what made European leaders focus on this time round rather than some of the other things that many, including the markets, thought were a bit more important.
Well, the obsession of 2011 for EU leaders, particularly German Chancellor Angela Merkel, has been austerity and fiscal discipline. Part of the reason that the German government argues that we're in the present situation is that the original fiscal rules were not enforceable sufficiently. So this fiscal compact and the six-pack of rules that were introduced in November of last year are designed, in theory at least, to ensure that states adhere to a deficit and debt limit that is very similar to what we saw with the Maastricht treaties in 1993, but a little bit stricter.
Right.
And it also empowers both the European Commission and the European Court of Justice to impose fines on debt offenders.
And did the markets respond in any positive way to this?
There was an initial market bounce.
Right.
In our view, this is premature and missing on some of the wider problems, which is that this fiscal compact really does nothing to address growth or unemployment. The figures, as you noted, that have come out have been quite grim. Unemployment is rising across much of the euro area, with the exception, of course, of Germany, where it's falling. And there are huge imbalances, trade imbalances within the euro area that this fiscal compact ignores. So lots to do for them in 2012.
We've also said a fair bit in our analysis about some of the difficulties of actually implementing this pact, with reference particularly to Ireland, but also to some extent to France, where there's been a slightly sort of hands-off attitude towards it for all that they've agreed in principle.
That's right. French President Nicolas Sarkozy is in favor of this accord. However, socialist candidate François Hollande, who's also the front-runner right now in the presidential race, has vowed that if elected, he will renegotiate this treaty. In respect to that, President Sarkozy has declined to have this put before Parliament before the race begins.
We've spoken, and commentators have as well, about the skill of the German Chancellor in getting to this stage quite as quickly as she had, but there has been some missteps too, not necessarily on her part directly, but in terms of German diplomacy. I'm thinking particularly of the news at the weekend that there would be a commissioner in Brussels who would take a very stern and controlling view of Greek finances. That's not the kind of signal that is being well received in Athens, nor presumably in other capitals.
Well, that's true. It's not just simply in Greece that this is an issue. This prospect and this aspect of national sovereignty could lead to a referendum being held in Ireland as well. If this fiscal compact has to be put into national constitutions, some countries require ratification on a national level. Denmark would have been one. The Czech Republic could be another if they choose to come in 2013. They've stayed out for now. So, and presumably, in the far chance that Britain were ever to join, it too would probably have to hold a referendum. So we're seeing a real tension in Europe at the moment between this idea that if power could simply be centralized in Brussels, all would be well. Lots of national governments disagree with that, and certainly their populations do. We're
going to see, presumably as the year goes on, and hopefully not too far on, a return to attention on the bailout fund, its size, its capacity to cope with some of the severe problems. The employment data that we saw this week is a very painful reminder of the scale of the problem and the absence of growth. Because the variations there are enormous, aren't there? We've seen in Germany what you might almost call a shortage of labour, and in Spain and Portugal you've seen youth unemployment in particular at very dangerous levels.
Yes, you're going to be seeing right now in the next, I'd say, quarter or two, significant moves in both Spain and Italy to reform their labour markets. Portugal also. Germany has a different problem, which is that unemployment now is below the level it was at reunification. It's now at 5.3%. So we could be expecting some sort of labor migration happening to Germany too. It will be interesting to see what happens over the course of the year, but right now the pressure is really going to be on the weaker countries, not the stronger ones, to push through the reforms. Angela Merkel will be very insistent on that.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thank you for watching. Do look out for our continuing coverage of the crisis in Europe and the implications for the economic outlook there.